Hello, Millenites.
Hello.
Hello. Guess what? We're in round 2 tonight of video time, so
I'm tired,
get
you guys.
ready to. We didn't eat any grain right before this video got started, so we're struggling. But don't
We
worry.
need to crunch on some grain.
If only we had a grinder. Which brings us to frequently asked questions. That's what tonight's all about. Because part 1 of becoming a Millenite is obviously an oodles of enthusiasm, but practically we forgot some super important fundamentals.
There's a lot of newbies out there. We were newbies once.
Sorry.
And we kind of were like, go mill your own grain.
Go, just go grind.
Get him. Go.
And people are like, hey, what kind of mill did you guys use? Super good question. Sorry we didn't answer it in the beginning. We never circled back around to that question.
We talked about the mill we didn't have any longer.
That was the Wonder Mill? Wonder Mill.
It's a great mill, too.
So we changed out the Wonder Mill. We left that thing far behind in the lands of villages on top
Another
of
OG.
mountains. We left it in the hands of an OG. Yeah.
It was in
Shout
good
out to
hands.
you, Millenite. Okay. We recommend, obviously, the Wonder Mill, the Nutra Mill.
At least
Those are like the staples.
At least those. I'm sure there's
Like,
other good ones, too. I've
there-
heard things
I'm
about
sure.
the mock mill.
It's crushing it, literally. But there's a Nutrimil out there, you guys, that apparently has corundum. This is corundum. I use it for sharpening these. Go check out my Way of the Blade episode. Get edgy. Yes, corundum. You know what else is corundum? Sapphires. I want to grind my grain with sapphires. Now you can. You ever read Exodus 24:10? He gave them sapphire tablets for the commandments to be written on. Now you could grind grain with sapphires. So that's the Nutrimil. They've got that. There's also one called a...
Well, I don't know what model it is. We'll
I
throw
don't
up a
either.
picture.
It's got wood and
It looks
corundum.
nice.
It looks beautiful.
We don't have that one.
We don't have that one because we got ours for $65 off of Facebook Marketplace,
right, guys.
which was a miracle.
It was used, and these things have warranties, you guys. I know Wondermill, I'm pretty sure Wondermill and Nutrimil,
10-year?
I think it's at least a 5-year warranty, if not longer. I think Mockmill has a similar warranty as well.
There is another versions of mills that are out there, you guys, that are way cheaper. Good old Swequity. They may make that sound.
It's just what I envision.
We've done it sometimes. You can get those guys for super cheap. You probably could get some because
you know what?
nobody
There's
wants.
no shame. I know
Oh,
we
man,
we
they're
kind of
awesome.
get a kick, but no, literally, you guys.
You could get your grind on.
If the electricity went out tomorrow, who's laughing now?
Canadians, because they're always out of electricity.
That's all I have to say.
I got to talk with a missionary.
Who's laughing now?
I got to talk to a missionary who literally said in Africa, it was very common that they were without electricity 18 hours of the day. And then there's other times in the capital where they had no electricity for 4 months. In Africa.
Wow.
Don't forget, it's at the equator. The equator. So hot. You know who didn't bother with being depressed about it? All the grinders out there. Or this style. There's so many different options out there. Go and try it for yourself, y'all. Go grind your grain. That's it.
How
That's
about your
the
ox?
definition of Millenites.
How about your ox?
Some of you
treading
need to
up
fire
that
up the
grain?
watermill too.
Oh,
Maybe we'll roast some
yeah.
of that in here.
Yeah.
Anyways, this is things we dream of. We literally would dream of having land and having a water-powered grinder made of corundum, made of sapphires, real sapphires. So these are options.
However
There's-
you want to mill your grain, you guys, y'all are Millenites.
The day you
just-
grind your grain.
You just mill away.
So
However
fine.
that
Go and
makes
try
sense
it.
to you.
But I know some of you guys were like, please, just tell us what
Just
you recommend.
tell me what
Just
to
tell me.
do.
I'm selling everything I have. I'm cashing in the IRA. Good for you. Buy grain. Be Yosef in your community. They need you. So that brings us to another great story of the scriptures, the bread of life, shall we? How to store grain. Okay, real quick, one other hand mill recommendation that's also uses corundum. It's called the Samep. I'll roll in the picture so you don't know, so you do see. This grain mill, it's made of wood and corundum. Every chance I can to get sapphire in your face and in my mouth or anybody else's is a win for everyone. So eat the words of the covenant as you talk about them. They'll be coming out of your mouth. And as you read them out loud, you'll be eating them too. That's what the scriptures are for. So anyways, what's the next thing?
I think that's our next step is to try to do the stone ground ones, you guys. We got the electric one, but if the power goes out, we gotta have some stones.
I'll run my generator.
But for now, we're really happy with our used Nutrimill. It sounds like a jet engine. I'll give you a little sound preview here.
I just gave you mine.
It's intense.
It's super intense. And then when she opens this thing up with like amaranth, it's like 40 seconds of like... It's literally like somebody kicked on the afterburners just for a moment.
Let's tell them how to buy grain.
What grain? How to buy grain?
What grain to buy?
What grain to buy?
Because they're like, I have my mill. I have my mill. What do I do now?
Now what?
Now what?
I need grain to feed this thing.
I need grain. What kind of grain?
What kind of grain?
What kind of grain, Nathan?
Amaranth.
No.
I'm just kidding.
No. Well,
no.
Yes. But no.
But no, grains. No. Grains. You know what? The classic hard red wheat. Obviously, let me just pause real quick. I'm going to say real quick, organic. Just
first and foremost.
Just pause. If you guys don't know this, there's a difference. Organic. Super fundamentals. Let me just tell you how much of my life is spent learning the difference between conventional and non-conventional. Organic.
Just tell them about the oranges really quick.
How about I tell you about oranges?
A little preview.
Oranges and squashes. Okay, you ready for this?
This is all you need to know.
Nicotinoids. Okay. Here's what the giant monsters that are the dragons of the Reynolds family and all those other tobacco tycoons out there have done to ruin your lives and to kill all your children. You ready for this? Tobacco. We used to smoke it, right? Not we, as in me personally, just the collective nations of the world. We used to all smoke this stuff like crazy. And that's when people like the Winston-Salem dynasties built cities in North Carolina out of tobacco profits. And then, people fell out of favor, death and all that stuff that started catching up to people. So what are they going to do? Well, if we can't get these people to smoke it, how are we going to get them to eat it? How are we going to get nicotine into the bodies of the American people and all of the world? I got an idea. How about we just inject it directly into all the things they eat? Yep. So they created a problem known as greening disease in Florida. If you've ever been to Florida or the southern portions of the country, there's a disease that took over in the early 2000s that literally eradicated every orange tree that basically existed down there. Like, incredible devastation. Basically what happens is there's a bacteria that lives inside of a bug. That bug goes and bites a leaf of an orange tree or other stuff, but predominantly citrus trees. I won't just say oranges, citrus in general, limes, lemons, pomelos, grapefruits, all the good stuff. It bites the leaf. When it bites the leaf, after about 15 seconds of it feeding on there, or maybe less, this bacteria gets deposited into the tree. And then what happens is that bacteria then goes down into the roots of the tree, where it basically feeds off of and eats the roots. It causes the roots to kill themselves. The ends of the roots just perpetually die. So citrus trees, they used to put out leaves and lots and lots and lots of fruit. Those leaves would stay on for about 4 years. Then they would drop their leaves and they would put out new ones. Now what happens is the tree, if it doesn't die, because generally if they get it when they're young, they just die. If they survive, they are perpetually losing their leaves, like every 18 months. And these poor trees are exhausted. They're exhausted. They got nothing left in them. Normally trees need these things called flushes, like where when you don't see the outside of a tree blooming, its roots are actually blooming. It's called a flush. If the outside leaves are going, the roots are not. So trees work through these systems and these cycles. Well, this disease has rapidly destroyed that entire cycle. So you used to go, if you guys ever went to Florida when you were young, and maybe just previous generation, you used to go and see these orchards which is covered in hanging in oranges and grapefruits, just hanging there. And now you can see through the orange groves. You can walk through and it's just, you can see them. The trees are bare. There's some oranges, maybe there's some leaves, but they're basically bare. So you've got all these farmers out there that are like, I've got 500 acres of oranges. What are we going to do? Let's turn to the solution category side of the Hegelian dialectic, shall we? Enter in the nicotinoids. Basically, they soak the ground around the ring of the tree with nicotine, super high concentrations of nicotine. The tree then, it's like a systemic. It goes into the system of the tree and into such a high concentration that when that bug lands on the tree and it starts to eat the leaf, within about 2 to 8 seconds, it drops dead. It goes, dies. Like, just like that. You can watch videos. Maybe I'll just roll in clips for you. It literally goes, convulses and dies. You know what else dies when it eats that thing or touches it? Everything else, like honeybees. Oh, wait, how are oranges populated? How do you get the orange to turn in from a flower into an orange? Honeybees, son. Don't worry, you just murdered all of them. So we should grieve because we've been eating the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because just like Eve in the garden, she got beguiled by pretty looks. And all of you people that buy food out there, you sucker into the dragon's net every time you buy pretty food. So when you go and buy pretty good-looking oranges, they're basically death. Full of nicotine. Like, no joke. When you get orange juice, full of nicotine. Not even a little bit. High concentrations of this to where people won't even want to test it, let alone publish the results of that. So you have to look into countries like South Africa. Shout out to you, South Africans. Way to go. They publish studies that can show you that, yes, indeed, when you soak the plants in nicotine, 6 months later, if you didn't soak them anymore, there's still nicotine in the orange juice. That's what's happening to all of our foods. Now, oranges, they might show up 6 months after the fact, but you can spray tomatoes. They soak tomatoes in this stuff. They soak squashes in this stuff. They soak all kinds of produce, you guys, predominantly in California, areas of Texas and Arizona and Florida. These are our main growing areas in the off seasons of the rest of the country. And they just bathe this stuff in it. And so now that's what you eat. So it's really, really important you guys understand glyphosate is another one that's used tremendously when it comes to wheat. So if you guys are going to look at buying grains and you're like, yeah, but the conventional stuff is so much cheaper. So is death. Death is always cheaper.
There's always a reason.
Death is super, super, super cheap. Like 4 pounds of pressure punctures the human skin. Just a couple pounds of pressure. Super cheap. So too is conventional grain, which will kill you just as slowly as maybe like a lot of pokes from this 4 pounds of pressure. That's what happens every time you eat that grain. So you're not actually an original grinder if you're doing just conventional. I understand there's limitations when it comes to cost, but you can pray to the Father who will give generously out of his storehouses to his children as he's promised us. He will give you it. Even if it's a smaller amount, it's going to be better for you than anything you get from a high conventional because they spray this stuff with so much glyphosate that it literally, they use it to dry the crop at the end. So they're going through and they're dousing it with extra glyphosate at the end so that it dries faster. The reason they're doing that is so that when you go to store it, they're getting the content of moisture to a certain level so you can store it, which is helpful. The problem is then you get to eat poison. But there's also lots and lots of poisons that are used that they just spray into the plants now that are not on the outside. So they're just growing inside of it perpetually. So long diatribe to just warn you against conventional, unconventional. Buy ugly fruit. Go watch my conference talk in, I don't know, Atlanta. Sacred Word Conference.
And if you're going to go to all the trouble of milling your own grain to get the health benefits from the grain,
buy quality.
Yes, don't buy bad
poison. Don't buy poison.
Grain. Don't buy poison grain.
Please. Please. We love you guys, and we want you guys to eat life.
Help.
That's what the Father loves you guys so much to even reveal any of this to us. But basically, there's some major caveats to grain. The most commonly used grain for most of us is going to be hard red wheat. Why?
Or hard white.
Hard white. Wait, there's more. There's a lot of kinds, okay? Hard red spring, hard red winter, hard white spring. Most commons. High protein levels, 11 to 15%, mostly used for bread flours, okay? Then you have a whole other category, which is soft red winter, soft white winter, and soft white spring. These are like 9 to 12% protein levels, and they're generally used for things like pastries, cookies,
pizza dough.
Pizza dough.
Crackers.
Yes.
Crackers.
Pizza dough, which is a Hebrew word, by the way. Pizza is a Hebrew word. Look it up. I digress.
The other thing you want to note too, so those are the typical wheat berries, right? And then there's a whole other there's the whole gluten side of the gluten-free side, I guess, or gluten-ish free side.
Which there's a lot of questions on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions on that. There's other wheat berries that are known as the ancient grains, you guys, or heirloom grains. And these are your einkorns, your spelt, kamut. Those are heirloom or ancient grains, meaning that they haven't, they're the original grains as far back as you can go. And
they've not been meddled with.
spelt, I think, was a hybrid. Spelt ended up being a hybrid of einkorn. And then I don't even know about kamut. I don't know too much about this, you guys. But basically, the more they kind of kept hybridizing wheat, it's my understanding that the protein, I think it's that the protein molecules ended up getting bigger or something like that. And so that's why maybe people who are super, super, super sensitive have a harder time with the wheats, that have been more hybridized than they would with the ancient grains. They're going to have an easier time digesting with the ancient grains.
Like
However,
kamut's one that came out of like the Egyptian tombs times, like maybe the times of Joseph. Do you know what I mean? Just saying.
So, I mean, I will say this. I have tried spelts, and I've personally tried einkorn. I love the taste of einkorn, you guys. It is so delicious. It's so rich. It's so flavorful. I really love the flavor. It's really expensive.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sit here and be raw einkorn because it's so expensive.
Organic einkorn is
Oh my
brutally
gosh,
expensive.
you guys. Yeah. So if you have the means to do it, it's a great grain, but it's really expensive. And I still think that the other wheats, the hard red wheats, the hard white wheats and such are fantastic as well. And the whole thing is that you milling your own grains at home, you guys, you're releasing those enzymes, you're releasing those oils and those minerals, like because you're using the whole grain flour and you're crushing it and you're making that grain immediately with the flour before it's spoiling or going rancid, like you're getting all that fresh goodness baked right into whatever you're making. You're gonna be able to digest the wheat. Like I had all that wheat sensitivity too, and I can do the wheats just fine. The hard red wheat, the white red, yeah, and I don't have any problem whatsoever. So while typically they will say that einkorn, spelt, kamut, you can digest those more easily, and that's why they get labeled as kind of more the gluten-free or the lower gluten profile wheats that people tend to be able to tolerate them more easily. I can still tolerate all the other wheats. So I do them all. I have a little bit of everything, you guys, and I mix and match as I'm making bread. I love to take a cup of hard wheat and mix a half a cup of einkorn in there and then mix some amaranth in there. And I love amaranth, you guys. That is a gluten-free seed.
Good.
And it is delicious. Like it has such a good flavor and it adds a lot of moisture and texture into your baked goods too. So have fun with it. Part of being a Millenite is just having fun, play around with it. You don't have to be an expert from the get-go. It's definitely a lot of trial and error. You're gonna try great recipes. You're gonna make great loaves of bread. You're gonna have total fails. You're gonna not like this recipe. Like it's totally a learning process as you go. So don't be intimidated. Have fun with it. And definitely don't be afraid to mix and match with the flours and the grain, or mix and match your flours and grains to try to come up with the best combination that you like.
Yes. There's some grains that are out there that are also just basically not wheaty grains, like oats, amaranth,
Rice. You can grind rice.
You can grind corn.
Barley.
Yes. Barley. Rye. By the way, another biblical
Barley
bread.
and rye, guys.
Feeding the 5,000 men, like 25,000 humans, with barley loaves. We don't have any barley. We would really like to get barley.
We gotta try some
We'd
barley.
like to get some grain. We're running super low on the grain side of life because,
We're
you
Millenites.
We're Millenites. And you know what? Grain, beauty, one of the best things, like Sue Becker, if you guys haven't watched it, check out our Sue Becker Bread of Life video. The very last minute, one of the things that she says in there is so beautiful.
How many of you have read books like Wheat Belly and you're hearing, oh, I'm gluten insensitive and I'm gluten intolerant and grains are bad and bread is bad and bread makes you fat? Listen, the stuff in the store does. We've already said that. We've already determined that. That is not bread. That is not what Jesus compared himself to. In fact, if you talk to Brad, he'll tell you it's the Antichrist. So anyway, But I found this verse. Well, you know it. It's 1 Timothy. Sorry, I'm like, I can't find it. 1 Timothy. This just leapt off the page at me. For 100 years, we've been eating dead bread, okay? All the life been taken out. In fact, we sifted the bran and germ out, right? Do you remember when Jesus was about to die and he looked at Peter and says, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you as wheat. Well, you don't sift wheat, you sift flour. And he was saying, and I thought about this today, he was saying to Peter, Satan wants to remove everything that's valuable to you and leave you as a worthless lump of white flour. That's my translation. But anyway, that's what he's saying there. He wants to sift you as wheat. They sifted flour, and Peter knew exactly what he was talking about. And so for 100 years, we've been eating this dead bread that is making us fat, has made us sick, has made us all these things. Diabetic, heart disease. Heart disease was not an issue till bread started being, white bread came on the market. It just wasn't. A few isolated cases, but it wasn't there. So we've been eating this bread for 100 years. And now we're sick and fat. But listen to this. In the last days, it says, and I don't know where you are in your time scheme of things, and I don't necessarily want to get there, but we obviously are into some interesting days. It says that the Holy Spirit declares that in the last days, some will turn away from the faith, paying attention instead to deceitful and seductive spirits and doctrines of demons, misled by the hypocrisy of liars whose consciences are seared with a branding iron, leaving them I'm sorry, I do the Amplified, and it's way too much information. But anyway, who forbid marriage and advocate abstaining from certain kinds of food which God has created. Most of us stop there. Listen to the rest. It says, which God has created to be gratefully shared by those who believe. Listen, you can cook one piece of meat. You can cook one piece of meat. You can eat an apple all by yourself. You can eat a banana. You can fix some broccoli. But I'm here tonight to tell you, you can't make one roll. You can't make just one muffin. Bread was created by God to be shared, to be stored for difficult times that are coming. Even, listen to this, even the word companion. Do you know what it means? Do you know what the Latin word is there? Pan is bread, and com is with. Your companion is with bread. And do you see what the enemy is going to try to do to us? He's going to first tell us bread is terrible, bread is ugly, bread will make you fat. So now we go out and say, Jesus is the bread of life. And they go, oh no, that's bad. Bread is bad. Bread makes you fat. Bread makes you, I can't eat bread. It has to have all. And then that was food that is to be shared. So don't let someone take your life and take away the very calling that God has called us to, is to share the real bread of life.
We love giving bread away. We love giving the bread away with the scriptures. We literally like to make gifts for people. We like to sneak them on people too. We're sneaky. I like to.
You can wrap the bread in linen. It's really fun.
So we like to give loaves and linen and life. That's the scriptures. So we like to give them linen. We like to give them a loaf, and then we like to give them the bread of life, which is the scriptures. So we like to do that, and we like to sneak that on people. I used to sneak in people's houses and do terrifying things. But now I give them bread. And it's the best. It's the best.
It is the best. It's the best.
Be a sneaky Millenite. Share it.
We want to talk too about where do you buy these grains?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the grains and what types you can buy. Where do you even buy these things, you guys? So we suggested Sue Becker does have a grain storage house that she distributes grain out of.
Mm-hmm. Go there. She's awesome.
She's in Atlanta, Georgia.
Drive there. It's less than a Canadian's drive to work, so you could get there in no time at all.
if you're in the area, stop in and see Sue and her husband and her family. It's a family-run business, so they
awesome.
run that business, and they'd be glad to answer any questions you have and talk with you and chat with you. And they do sell mills there and a bunch of other things too. But
real quick, she also has a super helpful video
yes.
on her channel, which is the Getting Started.
Yes.
I think it's Getting Started. We'll put a link directly in the description below, you guys. Just always look down. We have a little tab that says video description. There's so much in there every time. Go there. Check out that video. It's long and wonderfully informative.
5 hours long, you guys.
Here's another thing. We don't have any affiliation with Sue.
No.
We don't have. I don't think she knows us in any capacity unless you Millenites have chatted about us, which is awesome. But I met her one time before
when we stopped in to get grain.
And I was speaking at a conference, and I was like, "You have no idea how much you've changed our life." And people say that about grain to her, I'm sure, constantly. So, but we just genuinely love what she has done in bringing this thing that has been disregarded and abandoned. Like, he said he's going to take from the people the sound of the grinding stone as part of the curse. That's definitely happened. So I'm thankful that people have been out there faithfully trying to reinvigorate the people with the sound of the grinders. I love that. Sue's done that for our family, and so I really appreciate her. We like to support her. There's another Sue has in that 5-hour video a lot of products that she sells or things that she utilizes. So take it or leave it, you guys. We just gleaned from it the information that was super helpful.
She has a lot of helpful tips.
That's super what we want you guys to be able to capture out of there.
Yes. So, and then she also does go into how to use bread. I think she briefly goes into how to use a bread maker. She might even have some other videos about like gluten-free baking, bread making with a bread maker. I know she has some different videos too that may be helpful for one of you guys or some of you guys too. So
just
feel
go
free
hunt.
to check her.
Hunt.
Check her channel out. And we don't just want to send you guys to like a be all, video, because I don't know that there is one out there, but we want you to do your due diligence just like we have had to, go out there, do your own research, look around, hunt around, just like we tell people to go out into these thrift stores and hunt these garments and hunt this linen. You got to go out into the internet or go out into your stores, whatever, and hunt this stuff out and ask questions. And if you know anybody who mills already, go ahead and ask them, hey, where do you get your hard wheat? Do you get it locally? Where, what's a reputable organic farm in the state that I could buy local hard red wheat berries from? Or
wait, I have just a little very helpful tidbit of information. If you're in the United States, you guys have in your area somebody who is basically your agricultural extension office. Everybody's got these, you guys. They're there to support the agricultural industry in any capacity in your region. They have services available to everybody, and one of those is almost always where and how they can find places that supply stuff like this too, which is something that I did not know until I started researching a lot of things like orchards and how to find out what kind of disease is now growing on this plant or on this vegetable. They literally will help you identify problems you're having. Even if you're just a backyard gardener, you guys, you'll have a county level version of this, you'll have a multi-wide county version of this, and then you'll have a state size version of this, okay? That's their job, their full-time job to do that. They'll send out people that will literally come to your place and bag up something that you have a pest problem, or they'll come along with a special vacuum that vacuums up all the bugs that are on top of all of your onions or on your strawberries or on any of your apples. And they'll then examine those things under a microscope and tell you kind of the good spiders that you have in there, the bad ones, because you need spiders on your stuff. Didn't know that, did you? But they're called predatory. They're wonderful. Anyways, they're awesome. And that's a resource that actually will help you even learn things like how to store stuff and other things like that. Utah crushes this because, they're super preppers out there. Y'all crushing it. But can we talk about storage? Not yet. I wanted to say other places people could go to get grain.
Yes, besides Sue's. I mean, because we got ours from Sue because it was convenient, but it might not be
only
convenient.
24-hour drive.
And I was going to say, if you're all the way over in California, to buy from Sue in Atlanta might be a little pricey.
And super fun to drive there. You could stop at the ocean.
So you might want to find somewhere local, a local distributor or somewhere nearby that won't have as expensive to ship to you because grain is expensive to ship. There are a couple of there's many online places. I know there's
Just give them one recommendation.
I've heard of a few. Like foodtolive.com has organic grains in bulk.
Say that a little slower.
Foodtolive.com. We have bought our spelt from them and we've bought spelt from them, amaranth, buckwheat, and I think some Himalayan sea salt from them in bulk. I will say this about them is that I think it's free shipping and no taxes, but it's not cost effective if you're only buying like 5 pounds. You got to buy like
12-ish,
10 to 25 pounds for it to be more cost effective for you. So if you're buying bulk, that can be good. They didn't have a lot in the wheat as far as I was concerned. I wasn't sure, but they had...
Not as much variety.
Like I said, they had the spelt, and they definitely had buckwheat and the amaranth, so that was kind of a neat place to order that from. We've also heard that ordering from Azure Standard can be very good. They're a co-op, so you have to put your order about a month in advance, so it takes a little... preparation to make sure you get your order placed and some time, of course, to then find a co-op location where you can then pick up your grain from them. But I think they have pretty reasonable prices as well. And I don't know if it's a membership. Too. I don't know if you have to pay to be a member. I don't know any of that about Azure Standard, but I have heard that as a recommendation that they have good organic products.
Lots of people love that.
I've also heard I heard this randomly the other day, but that like Young Living, you guys know the essential oil company, that they sell grain, which I didn't know about. So I think there's
grain out there, guys. There's grain out there. You just got to go find it. Yeah. Just like with all good treasure hunting. Go hunt. That's like the LinenRailroad motto. Be a good treasure hunter. Go find treasures of grain. How to store it. Can I just talk about storage? Let's talk about Joseph.
He really wants to talk
I'm
about
super
storage.
Pumped on this, you guys.
He really wants to tell you guys how to store this grain. Okay. Let's hear it.
Let's just go into this real quick because Joseph clearly has a vision that is, he interprets a vision, which is all about grain going bye-bye. So he has to store so much grain that it literally becomes innumerable. And he has to store it in Egypt, hot, which is generally bad news for storing anything. And humid, second worst thing for storing stuff, okay? Fundamentals when it comes to food storage and preservation. When you're trying to store grain, like a seed, okay, you want to store it in a place that's ideally as consistent temperature-wise and humidity-wise as possible, right? So there's ways that you can try to control some of those characteristics. There's another thing you're trying to protect it from, too, which is super important, which is pests, insects, predominantly. Something called a weevil, wheat weevil. We've seen these.
The little wheat weevil.
They're not so friendly to be eaten. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to grind those. You don't want to mill those, okay? They're nasty. You don't want to eat them, and they're super bad. And here's the problem. When most places go out and they harvest these 23 million acres of wheat at once, they don't really clean it or process it. So sometimes you can buy your grain from a place that's been just harvested it and shoved it in a giant silo. Then you can buy it from a processor who's generally cleaned it and sifted it to get out the crudsies from a lot of it. The problem is still weevils and these insects, bacteria, fungus, pests. They lay eggs in it and they have spores that are in there and on it, and you can't really get it off all the way. And so when you go to buy 40 pounds or 20 pounds or you buy big bulk supply, you're like, we're loading up for the end of the world. Awesome. When you do that, you then have these huge giant bags of grain, which likely have bugs inside there that you can't see. And those bugs will slowly emerge at times of mucho inconvenience, like when you want to eat it. So some of the ways to control that or mitigate that, first things first, diatomaceous earth, my best friend of the earth families of dust. Here's a dust you can eat that's so good for you and gives you great relief from inflammatory pains and arthritis and skin disorders and anti-parasites. And it used to be on most of our food, you guys, because before people poisoned everything, like with the nicotinoids, they used to put diatomaceous earth on stuff as a natural insecticide. Basically, it's got these sharp talon-like features in it that scrape along the exoskeletons of bugs and kills them. It's marvelous.
The slugs don't like it.
They don't like it one bit. which is great for you. So animals like our livestock used to eat it a lot. And all of these vegetables and fruits that we used to eat used to have it on it. So it would get in our body and naturally convert this silica bioavailable into our bodies to give us like collagen production and help our skin and all this stuff. It's amazing. You can mix that in with your grain and it will help to act as a natural insecticide in the grain and is great for you to also then eat. Okay? Diatomaceous earth. Super cheap.
There's a
food grade.
Food grade.
Food grade.
Yes, that's important.
Thank you.
Food grade diatomaceous earth.
There's another kind, which is not the kind you want. Food grade diatomaceous earth. I like the freshwater variety or saltwater. I think it's the freshwater variety I tend to be a fan of because, you know, I'm from the land of lakes, tiny lakes, like scabby ponds of Colorado. They're sad. But I found a diatomaceous. No, I found a bentonite clay mine, which I'm considered buying with this ruby. We'll see if they'll trade me it. You can pray for me. Anyways, diatomaceous earth is one way. The other thing is basically how to store it in, what to store it in. There's things like mylar bags, you guys, which are kind of like aluminum foil lined bags that you can store it inside of. Then you can use things like oxygen absorbers, which will help to suck the oxygen out of that bag. Or like there's food grade buckets you can put it in, like the bags. The grain goes in the bag. 10-pound bags is what I tend to like because you can move them easily and it not break your back. And if a bag's too heavy, you guys just aren't going to move it a lot. And I know you, just like everybody else. We like to do things the most consistent way ever. And you got to rotate your grain, guys. You use the oldest stuff first and then you bring the youngest stuff and put it in the bag. So it allows you the ability to move your grain around it and not just be in a 60-pound sack in the corner. You know what I mean? Where it's going to get moldy and wet and soggy and full of weevils. So put it in bags that you can put in the buckets that you can then seal off with oxygen absorbers or my favorite method, check this out, carbon dioxide. You just breathe all over it with dry ice. That's so fun. Then you can make dry ice bombs, which are even more fun to make. If you haven't made a dry ice bomb, here's how you do it. Wait, I'll get there. Just put dry ice in the container, and what happens is it actually sucks all the oxygen. It displaces the oxygen, and then none of those bugs can live. They literally die. It's marvelous. So these are some of the different little methodologies out there. There's lots of recommendations, and some of them totally are fighting with the other ones. You can put them in the freezer. You can put your grain in the freezer for a couple of days or 7 to 10 days. We've seen all of the above. We've seen 3 days to 7 and 10 days.
Maybe err on the side of 10. I don't know.
But the other thing is you kind of got to get your grains sometimes down to 0 degrees, which nobody generally has a freezer that can do that. So there's like some challenges, you guys, that's definitely real. And
just do your best.
Do your best. Pray. I ask you guys to pray for us and pray for all the Millenites that the Father would reveal to us with wisdom how to store the grain, because he clearly did it before when they were facing a great time of dangerous calamity and scarcity of grain. He revealed to his people how to store the grain so that it would not perish during the years of plenty and during the years of famine. So that grain from year 1 needed to be able to supply all the way up through to year 7 and potentially to year 14. So that's something to consider. And grain can store some of like the harder varieties can store like pretty readily 9 to 13 years. The soft white varieties, the soft wheat varieties, tend to store less than 9 years. And that's because the soft white grain, if you put your soft wheat in the freezer and freeze it, it's got more space in it for water moisture to sit in it. And so it has more water crystals or ice crystals that form in there, and it spoils easier afterwards. So like when you pull it out and let it thaw, you need to use it really quickly after that. Whereas if you don't freeze your grain, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. And you generally can't go plant that grain in the ground and raise up a wheat crop. But most of you guys aren't farmers yet, but maybe you will become one. So things to consider when it comes to different methods that you can use to try to preserve it. You can also can your grain in like number 10 cans. That's another commonly used method. You can can your grain inside that and store it. Ideally, guys, you don't put all of your grain in just a big giant sack or a big bucket, because if, say, you do find bugs infesting one of your 10-pound bags, now you're only out 10 pounds of chicken feed instead of 10 pounds of delicious wheat that you could have eaten. So be intentional and strategic about trying to divvy it up to the best of your ability, okay?
And you're talking about more permanent long-term storage of the grain.
Probably should have said that.
I want to talk about just how to store grain that you're going to just use every day.
Great idea.
So I use, because our RV is a small space, I just use, are they the 3-gallon buckets?
Mm-hmm.
I think they're 3-gallon buckets. So they're half the size of the big ones.
2.5 gallon maybe.
Or no, 2.5, yeah. 2.5 gallon buckets. And then I just refill from my bigger 6-gallon bucket that's under the rig.
Which has a gamma seal. We put these things called gamma seal lids on our 6-gallon buckets or 5-gallon buckets.
They're like a big old handle on the top, and you can really crank them down and get a nice seal.
Airtight lid.
But yeah, airtight lid. But then you can open it easily instead of trying to get a little... what is that thing called?
Oh, knife.
Oh, well, where you pry it, you have to really pry it open. But yeah, this one doesn't take any prying. You just twist and it comes right off. You can get right in, easy access to your grain. But then you can seal it off and get that airtight seal again, kind of, with these Gamma Seal lids. They're really, really good. They can be kind of expensive.
Sue's was the cheapest we found anywhere.
The
Don't buy them off Amazon. Someone's going to pillage your wallet if you try to buy off Amazon.
It was kind of a rip-off on
I think she sold them for $8 a piece.
Someone's making a hustle.
Somebody else was selling them for $24 a piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Shocker.
of COVID. Because everyone's buying all this storage stuff.
But also, you don't store the flour that you've ground fresh because it won't keep. I mean, I'll be honest. I've eaten some leftover flours way after it. I just fed some to some chickens that were just elated, even though it was like 2 weeks old. So once you mill it, you guys, it starts to oxidize and break down, and it will go rancid, meaning it's not good for human consumption. It's great for livestock feed, always. Okay? Trust me.
And this is a tip that I do too. If I'm
mill it and use it.
Okay, let me just talk about this really quick. When you're milling grain, you guys, and you're taking your cups of your grain, okay, you're like, how much even grain do I use? Like, and Sue says that I think a cup of grain typically yields 1.5 cups of flour. Ish, okay? So you have to calculate when you're looking at a recipe, and you're saying, okay, 4 to 4.5 cups of flour, like that's going to be 2 cups of grain, right? Or 2.5 cups of grain. See, it's confusing. It's confusing, you guys. Every time I have to do the math, and I'm like, I always would rather, this is one thing I'm going to tell you as a tip. I would always rather overgrind use too much grain, have extra flour left over, than undergrind. And in the middle of the baking process or in the middle of the mixing process of mixing your dough, you're like, I don't have enough flour. And you have to go back, open up your buckets, get your grain, get your mill back out, grind the flour. That's really...
And ours is under our tables, so it's like playing Transformer every time I want to do it.
Such a pain, you guys. Like, the milling doesn't take very long. It is an extra step, though, and when you plan accordingly, everything goes really smooth with the whole process of baking. However, if you have to mill twice, then you're behind the 8 ball. You're spending way too much time milling. So I always would rather overgrind than undergrind, and then if you have that extra flour left over, you can use it to feed a sourdough starter. If you have a sourdough starter on the husband, feed your husband, let him make little dough balls that he likes to eat. Or just take it and I will put it in the freezer, and I'll keep it in the freezer for maybe till the next day. And I'm going to because I make bread every single day, you guys. I try to make some kind of bread, whether it's a biscuit, tortilla, loaves of bread, pancake, fry bread, whatever I'm making. I try to make some kind of bread for us every single day, the daily bread, right? I'm trying to do that, and it's awesome, but it's like, if I have overground flour, I'll just stick it in the freezer, and then I'll pull that flour out the very next day to make in my whatever. So that way I'm not really grinding ahead of time and trying to store, because we know that it definitely loses its nutrition the longer it sits. So the sooner you can use it, the better. Where can people buy a grain mill? Well, we bought ours used on Marketplace. I know eBay. I know Craigslist if you're buying used. Or you can just buy them new from the manufacturers online would probably be best. If you aren't aware that we have a Facebook group, it's actually Becoming a Linenite Facebook group. The Linenites and the Millenites unite, you guys.
God.
Big time. So even if you're like, well, I'm just a Millenite right now, that's okay. You can be just a Millenite right now, but you're
Till we get you your
be
linen.
united in a Facebook group with the Linenites, and you just see for a while. You just watch. Or vice versa. Vice versa. And I've heard a lot on Facebook, oh, we want our own groups. You need to separate the Millenites and the Linenites and all this stuff. No, you guys. No, you will start to realize that becoming a Linenite includes Millenites. It includes all these other topics we're going to touch on. Like, it's a culmination of all of it, you guys. So head over to our Facebook group, Becoming a Linenite, even if you're just a Millenite right now at this point, and you'll see that all of these things make sense, and all of these things kind of go hand in hand. They do go hand in hand, not kind of. That's all I'm going to say there. And feel free, Linenites and Millenites together, to post collectively on that Facebook group. It's a place where you can share tips for baking. It's a place where you can ask questions. If you're here's my sourdough loaf, I don't know what went wrong, troubleshooting. Or if you just want to share, look at these beautiful cinnamon rolls I made today. I'm so excited. These taste better than anything I've ever had. It's a place where you guys can find that shared community with fellow Millenites. And it's just a beautiful place to hear testimonials and get all your other enthusiasm and questions answered. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
One more thing on storing your grain.
Oh no. He's really about storing the grain.
Read the Bible if you want to learn how to store your grain. I challenge you. Find every reference to grain or how it was stored, because I think there's a treasure trove, a treasure chest of goodness waiting for those who would look into it. And water and oil, yeast. Anything about yeast? Didn't somebody have a question on yeast?
Yeast, well, I was going to say the wild yeast you capture out of the air would be if you have a sourdough starter. And that's a way that you can make sourdough bread, and you can use the sourdough starter as your yeast, right? However, if you're just using regular yeast, you wanted me to touch on tips for yeast?
What do they do with it? How do they store it?
Yes, yeast can be stored, and this is just your regular like
baker's yeast, brewer's yeast,
really.
Yeah. The brewers.
Yeah, if you're using that, you can just store it. Actually, storing it in the freezer is great. It will help keep it for a long time. Keep it for a while. I think at least a year.
Keep it quiet in there.
Yeah, keep it nice and hushed in there. If you're having trouble getting your bread to rise, you may not be having a warm enough area. You may not, for your bread to rise, you may not be proofing the yeast. I know in a lot of Sue's recipes, she uses hot water. And then by the time you're adding the yeast, the dough is like a nice warm temperature, but not too hot that it's going to burn and scald the yeast and kill it. But it's going to help to activate that yeast and get it proofing and bubbling and going. If there's anything else, get good quality olive oils. Yes. Sue loves to use olive oil and
cold pressed extra virgin
olive oil.
It's important.
She likes to use honey in a lot of her recipes too, and I really do think it adds moisture to the bread, and it really gives it a nice mild sweetness, not overly bearingly sweet. But
there's better honeys for baking.
And honey helps aid in digestion. And even if you're not baking with the honey, if you have the bread and you slice it and you put some honey on it and then you let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes, that amylase will do what's called pre-digestion. That amylase in the honey will do what's called pre-digestion, and it will help to break down some of that bread for you. And you just need to cut into that bread while it's hot and put some butter on there and some honey and just enjoy it.
Go find a grass-fed cow.
Good.
Milk it. Make some butter. And then put that on your beautiful, delicious bread.
Wow.
Hey, I've seen some Millenites and Linenites out there who have just such a thing going on.
And they have their own honeybees.
Way to go. You know who I'm talking about, you mighty Gibboreem. Answer. No. You have hands. Even if you don't have hands, you have feet. If you don't have hands or feet, I sure hope you have somebody known as a friend to help you. Because you can use what's called a kneading bowl. Biblical.
Yes.
Biblical.
Yes.
So awesome.
And actually, okay, I have a KitchenAid mixer that Nate and I got as a wedding gift. And I've used it a fair amount for all of my baking and such. And I used to make it, make my challah dough with it, before we ground our own flour and all of that. I've actually found that since I started grinding my own flour, and I will just say this, since I started grinding my own flour, and I'm making bread with my mixer, I feel like I don't know what it is. And maybe it's just Yah is calling me to the kneading bowl, guys. I'm really feeling that more and more. That's probably what it is. It probably has nothing to do with the mixer itself, but I feel like I have to add too much flour, and when it is trying to knead my dough for me, I feel like the dough is so dense and I can't handle it. I feel like it does I don't want to say it does a bad job, but it feels so impersonal, and I feel like I'm standing by watching this thing knead my bread for me, and I feel kind of left out of the process. And I'm just going to be real and honest with you guys. Since I started using the kneading bowl, I love it. This gal said this was her great grandmother's kneading bowl, bread bowl, and it's from Italy. And I just blew a lot of flour around. It's from Italy. Isn't that amazing? This has so much history, so many loaves of bread being kneaded in this bowl, so many hands to this bowl, lots of love into this bowl. So we picked this up. I'm so excited to adopt this as my fellow kneading bowl. It's not a super deep bowl. It's kind of wide, but I'm experimenting. I'm going to try it out and see how I like it. And yeah, I mean, if another bowl comes my way that's a different size, I may end up trying that too. But for now, I have this beautiful Italian kneading bowl. So. And it's not just using the kneading bowl on the counter, you guys. You've got to get down on the ground. You've got to get on your hands and your knees, and you've got to get kneading into this bowl. You've got to get your body into the kneading motion, and it will be so much easier to knead. I break a sweat every time I knead. I am not even kidding. I start to get a little sweaty on my forehead, but it feels so good because you're an active participant in the bread making instead of watching that dough hook do it for you. And I'm not saying I don't use my mixer. Sometimes I'll use my mixer to incorporate the ingredients, and it's very sticky, but before I would switch over to that dough hook, that's when I take it out and I put it in my floured bowl and I flour up my hands and I get into that stickiness, and I keep sprinkling flour, and yeah, it'll be sticky. You just get in there. Don't be afraid of it. It's awesome. I feel so good after I knead my own bread in my kneading bowl. My body feels like it got a good workout. I broke a little sweat. My love, my effort, my everything went into making that dough in that moment. And it feels so good, you guys. A little sweaty, guys. I'm not even going to lie to you. This takes some serious sweat equity and some elbow grease and a lot of love. I will say this, I think kneading on your hands and knees in a bowl was a lot more effective than when you're trying to do it on the counter, because you can't get any leverage on the counter. Like, you're doing it at waist height, and so maybe that's why kneading is so exhausting, because you can't get your whole body into it. Yeah, I broke a little bit of a sweat, but I was able to get my whole body into it. And maybe that's what we're supposed to do. Maybe it's supposed to be a little bit more aerobic. These women of the Bible, you guys, these Hebrew women, these Israelites, they were fit, you guys. I love it. You will not regret it. So, about the mixing question, do you need a mixer? Absolutely not. And actually, what's really, really fun is go watch some YouTube videos of people making sourdough with a kneading bowl, you guys. I'm not kidding. They put the flour in there, the water, the salt. They do it all with their hands. And they mix it, and then they knead and then they fold. And it is so cool, you guys. And these kneading bowls that they're using to make this sourdough, they're like big troughs. They almost look like animal troughs, like animal feeding troughs. They're these big troughs that are sort of rounded in there. But the whole thing with the kneading bowl too is after you knead it, you can leave your bread in the kneading bowl and then cover it with some linen. You can leave it in the kneading bowl to rise. And the whole thing with the kneading bowl is that it's kind of got this deeper area I have a wooden kneading bowl, and the wooden kneading bowl holds the heat. Okay, so if you have a warm kitchen, or I don't know, sometimes I do the cheater method kind of. I'll have my little space heater kind of going near it so that it kind of heats up the air by it. But I'll have it covered with the linen. But yeah, the bowl will heat up and it will hold that warmth, and the shape of it will hold the warmth too to help that bread to rise really nicely. So anyway,
That's
and you're
awesome.
covering it with linen. I mean, that's so cool. That's Millenite and Linenite unite, guys.
This is awesome. You ready for this? Ezekiel. There may be a brand out there called Ezekiel grain or Ezekiel bread. You know where they got the recipe? The Bible. You know, unfortunately, what that place doesn't do? Mill the grain fresh for you and then make it. I don't care how sprouted it is.
Sprouty
It's not
sprout.
the same. Here's what the commandment was. This is Yahweh talking to Ezekiel. And take wheat and barley
There's the barley, guys.
and beans and lentils
I love lentils.
and millet
I love millet.
and spelt.
Spelt?
Booyah. And you shall put them into one vessel and make bread of them. You shall eat it as many days as you lie on your side, 390 days. Your food you eat is by weight, 20 shekels a day. And drink water by measure, 1/6 of a hin, to be drunk from time to time. And eat it as a barley cake. Okay, how rad is that? There's a recipe for you. Sue Becker has like this mixture all done and in individual bags, 1 gallon bags. When you go to mix this mixture together, dry grains, right? Dry beans. When you go to mix it together, it can easily separate by weight. The heavier stuff goes down and the lighter stuff goes up. So you can't store this mixture in a huge, large cavern. 10-pound bags are awesome, guys. But in order to take this, it's storable, right? He's got 390 days. He's got to eat this stuff. It was stored. And then he would take from it, grind it, make it. Or maybe Ezekiel had a wife. I don't know. He'd grind it. It would be ground, and then he would bake it and eat it. That's Ezekiel bread, okay? It was ground fresh and then eaten. And it gave him life. So I think, yes, this could be probably one of the most perfectly balanced meals we could eat. This is like a version of manna. Do you know what I mean? People ate what is it? That's what manna means. What is it? They ate what is it and were completely sustained. Obviously, they had chickens and ducks, they had sheep and goats and cows and stuff like that. They had livestock and pigeons. They had animals that they could eat also, but they were sustained by the manna. Same thing for this. This bread was literally the bread of life to Ezekiel for 390 days.
That's a long time.
So we love the Ezekiel bread and the recipe that Sue has because it also includes an oodles of honey. And it is so good and so filling, you guys. I like the bread. Don't get me wrong. Like when Chelsea makes a loaf of hard red wheat, it's awesome. But when she makes the Ezekiel bread, she likes to make it into muffins, which are delicious. I am so satisfied and full
It's true.
for so long. Like I can eat one muffin
Yes.
and be like, I'm
So
done.
full.
Like
You're like,
I'm
I don't need
done.
any
And I
more.
work literally like a beast of the field sometimes. I'm volunteering full time on a farm. So much work. And I can eat a muffin. That's ridiculous. I've eaten like 15 muffins in an hour. I'm not joking. I eat an insane amount of food. That Ezekiel bread is so satisfying to my body nutritionally that it checks all the boxes. So, the scripture,
Oh my.
dadgummit, continues to provide wonderful treasures. So, I hope you enjoy that. Anyways, we love you guys so much.
Yes.
You Millenites are marvelous folk. We can't wait to see your wonderful grinding testimonials coming out because the Father has given you the bread of life. And we pray above all the bread that we talk about that this would be your most daily of breads.
Yes.
We hope you live dangerously every single day of your life because the days are evil, but you were born for such a time as this. We love you. We'll talk to you soon.